I've had some amazing teachers in my life. There have been some who have taught me skills, others who have changed the way I think about the world around me, and still others who have challenged me to delve into subjects and focuses that I never thought would interest me. But of all my rebbeim, of all my teachers, the greatest of them all is my wife, Meredith. Now, before you or throw your siddur at me, or whatever it may be, let me explain something really quickly. The work of a rabbi is demanding. It's tiring, and it requires a lot of hours of attentive listening, of empathy, and of a lot of emotional availability. And at the end of the day, Meredith gets, more often than she would probably ever admit, at least I hope she would never admit it, a rabbi who doesn't always seem so rabbinic. Meredith gets the version of me that has zero patience for Michigan drivers. She gets the version of me that whines and complains, that looks for sympathy and comfort rather than providing it. And most topical to this Devar Torah, she gets the version of me that is sometimes upset, that sometimes gets angry at the world, at myself, at my friends, at my family, or at total and complete strangers who have inadvertently wronged me in one way or another. But rather than shrugging off these annoyingly human moments, or worse, encouraging them, my wife sits me down and she talks me through it. She hears the emotion in my voice, the frustration coming out of a tired heart and a tired body, and without stating it directly but still voicing it very clearly for me to understand, she says, I don't expect you to always be a chaplain, to always be a counselor or some insightful theologian. I expect you to be you. And sure enough, that seemingly simple statement is perhaps the most difficult but important lesson for a rabbi, for a Jew, for a person. It requires a knowledge that goes far beyond any textbook or higher education. It requires teamwork, it requires vulnerability, and an often painful act of introspection. Because what my wife is so brilliant at teaching is this: be who you are because it is who you are. Not a version of yourself adjusted to a world that can be cold, that can be harsh, that can be unapologetic. The kusha here, the difficulty, this terminology that we have in the Talmud, a kusha, is something that's a difficulty. The kusha here is that the latter option, the giving in to anger, the giving in to spite, is so much easier. How much simpler is it to find out that a friend has talked about you behind your back and then to respond with bitterness, with low jabs, or with silence, rather than explaining how hurt their words made you feel? How much easier is it to adopt an every person for themselves mentality after being thrown under the bus by a coworker or a colleague than to address the issue and create a healthier team environment? But one of the most beautiful aspects of Judaism is that we Jews are not intimidated by kushas, by the challenges that confront our hearts, by the challenges that confront our souls. More often than not, when we read the Talmud, kushas come up in the rabbinic arguments of law and tradition, only to be addressed a few lines later with the words, lav kasha. This isn't, in fact, a difficulty. We can do better than this. And perhaps one of the most meaningful examples of this comes from a rabbinic discourse on this week's parasha, on this week's Torah portion. In one of the most famous scenes in the Torah, thanks in part to Cecil DeMille and Charlton Heston, Moshe and Aharon go before Pharaoh to demand the freedom of the Israelites. To prove that they are representing the God of Israel, Aaron throws his staff to the ground, and it turns into a serpent. Unimpressed, Pharaoh's official magicians respond by doing the same. They throw their staffs down, and their staffs turn into serpents. But then the Torah gives us a peculiar line. Now listen closely and see if you can find the kusha in this line. Vayashlichu ish matehu, vayihiyu latanenim, vayivlamate Aharon et matotam. And each of them cast their staffs down, and they became serpents. But Aharon's staff swallowed them. So what's the kusha in this line? Anyone? I'm going to read it one more time. And each of them cast their staff down, and they became serpents. But Aharon's staff swallowed them. The serpents belong to the magicians. Oh, swallowed the serpents or the magicians? That's an interesting kusha. Okay. I haven't read that. Okay, one more time. And each of them cast their staffs down, and they became serpents. But Aharon's staff swallowed them. Right. So the Torah is asking us, we have this question where it says, Aaron threw his staff down and it turned into a snake. All the Egyptians threw their staffs down and their staffs turned into serpents. But in our text, it doesn't say that Aaron's serpent ate the other serpents. It says Aaron's staff ate the other serpents. So, our rabbis tell us that our Torah is perfect. That is the understanding. It doesn't make mistakes. It doesn't repeat itself. It doesn't present anything it doesn't mean. So how do the rabbis respond to this kusha? Lav kasha. It isn't a difficulty. It's not a problem for us at all. According to our sages of blessed memory, the miracle that takes place here is much bigger because of what we thought could have just been a textual error. In Shemot Rabbah, a midrash on the book of Exodus, the rabbis write that Hashem returns Aaron's serpent into its original form, back into the plain wooden staff that he had just been holding in his hand. And it is this staff, it is this normal piece of wood that swallows the snakes of the Egyptian magicians. The text then goes on to say that God does this with kavanah, with a specific intention for doing so. Quote, and God said, if Aharon's serpent will swallow up the serpents of the Egyptians, there will be nothing remarkable in that. For serpents usually swallow each other. Therefore, let it resume its original form and swallow up their serpents. And now, apologies, one more Talmudic term for us to take home with us on this Shabbat. We have to ask ourselves, when we see this kusha addressed, when we see this kusha resolved, we have to ask ourselves one more question, and that question is, what is the nafkamina? Can everyone say that word with me? Nafkamina? Nafkamina. What is the nafkamina? What is the takeaway? Now that we have a kusha, now that we have a resolution, what is the nafkamina? What do we take away from this? Well, in good Jewish fashion, the nafkamina is for each of us to decide on our own. But I'll leave you this morning with my nafkamina. To me, this midrash, this understanding of the miraculous found in the everyday, is the same lesson that my wife so often teaches me. Be who you are because it is who you are. In order to stomp out the negative of your life, you don't have to become the negative yourself. It's so easy to respond to anger with anger, to violence with violence, to evil with evil of our own. But how remarkable is it? How beautiful is it? How holy is it to see the serpents that exist in our lives and to respond by being plain, simple staffs of wood? As the Lubavitcher Rebbe taught, for even when he wages war, the Jew is not a warrior. Even when he consumes the serpents of the enemy, he is not a serpent himself, spewing poison and hate. His instrument of vengeance is as devoid of vengeful feeling as a petrified rock, as cold to the rage of war as a lifeless stick. This world of ours is filled with kushas, and those kushas hurt. They make us feel low, they make us feel unappreciated, they tell us that we're less than, that we're small or unloved. And those serpents that represent those kushas expect to be met by serpents in return. But when we have teachers in our lives, when we have friends, when we have loved ones, when we have mentors, therapists, counselors who can help us with that difficult searching of ourselves, who can help us understand how beautiful it is to be a staff, a piece of splintered and worn wood, free from magic or miracle, then we can respond to the kushas of our lives with something far more powerful. Lav kasha. This isn't a difficulty. It's who we are. It's who we're supposed to be. And who we're supposed to be is holy. Shabbat shalom.